The applause had barely stopped when my mother announced that my younger brother would inherit the lakeside inn I had spent 9 years rescuing. Everyone raised a champagne glass to him. I was still wearing the apron I had used to serve their dinner. When I asked what would happen to the wedding program recipes and reputation I had built, my mother laughed. Then she pulled $40 from her purse and placed it beside my plate. "There," she said, "that should cover tonight's cooking." My brother folded the bills and tucked them into my apron pocket. Not one relative told him to stop. So I removed the apron, placed it on his chair, and said, "Then you can handle Thanksgiving without me." My name is Caroline Hayes, and until that night, I believed being indispensable would eventually make me visible. I was wrong. Sometimes people can depend on you for years and still refuse to see you as anything more than the help. I was 39 years old when my family finally taught me that lesson in front of 63 guests. The celebration took place at Hayes Landing, a weathered lakeside inn in northern Wisconsin that had belonged to my family for 3 generations. It sat at the edge of Pine Water Lake, 2 hours north of Madison, surrounded by red pines, birch trees, and the kind of silence people from Chicago paid good money to experience for a weekend. The original building had 12 guest rooms, a wraparound porch, a stone fireplace, and a dining room overlooking the water. In old photographs, it looked grand. By the time I returned home at 30, it was anything but grand. The roof leaked over rooms 6 and 7. Half the porch railings were loose. The dining room carpet smelled faintly of mildew. The website had not been updated since 2004, and the reservation system consisted of a paper calendar hanging beside the kitchen phone. My father, Richard, had suffered a minor stroke that spring. My mother, Susan, was trying to manage the inn while caring for him. My younger brother, Derek, was living in Milwaukee and working in luxury car sales. He came home for holidays, wore expensive watches, and told everyone he was waiting for the right opportunity to step into leadership. Apparently, leadership did not include replacing a broken water heater or cleaning up after a flooded guest room. That was where I came in. Before returning to Pine Water, I worked as the events manager at a boutique hotel in Minneapolis. I had spent 8 years coordinating weddings, conferences, charity dinners, and corporate retreats. I understood guest service. I understood budgets. I understood that the difference between a charming historic inn and an overpriced old building was usually one exhausted person noticing every detail before a guest complained. When Dad became ill, Mom called me crying. "I can't do this alone," she said. I resigned from my job within 3 weeks. I gave up my apartment, packed my belongings into a rental truck, and returned to the town I had spent most of my 20s trying to leave. At first, I told myself it would be temporary, 6 months, perhaps a year. I would stabilize the inn, help Dad recover, train someone new, and return to Minneapolis. That was 9 years earlier. During those 9 years, Hayes Landing became almost unrecognizable. I rebuilt the website and introduced online reservations. I photographed every room, wrote every description, responded to every review, and created seasonal packages that finally brought guests during the slow winter months. I replaced the faded curtains with soft linen panels, restored the original wood floors, and persuaded my parents to remove the plastic flowers that had been collecting dust in the lobby since the 1990s. I developed a small wedding program. At first, we hosted only 3 weddings a year. Then a photographer posted pictures of a ceremony beneath the lakeside oak tree, and inquiries began arriving from Milwaukee, Madison, and Chicago. 3 weddings became 8. 8 became 24. Within 5 years, couples were booking 18 months in advance. The dining room became known for my rosemary pot roast, brown butter apple cake, and Sunday brunch biscuits. The recipes were mine, although my mother called them the Hayes family menu whenever a magazine interviewed us. I trained the kitchen staff, hired seasonal workers, arranged flowers, solved plumbing emergencies, calmed nervous brides, carried luggage, cleaned rooms when housekeepers called in sick, and answered the reservation phone at 2 in the morning. I slept in a small apartment above the laundry room because it was easier than driving to town after midnight. My mother called that dedication. My father called it responsibility. Derek called it perfect because it meant he never had to come home unless someone was opening a bottle of champagne. Still, I loved the inn. That was the difficult part. If I had hated the place, leaving would have been easy. But Hayes Landing held the memories of my childhood. Dad taught me to fish from the old dock. My grandmother taught me to make pie crusts in the inn's kitchen. On summer evenings, my mother used to play records in the dining room after the guests went upstairs. I did not stay only because my parents needed me. I stayed because some part of me believed I was protecting a home that had once protected me. And for years, I believed my work would eventually be acknowledged. Whenever Mom introduced Derek as the future of Hayes Landing, I assumed she meant he would join me. Whenever Dad told guests that the inn would remain in the family, I imagined there would be a conversation about my role. Whenever Derek appeared for a holiday weekend and accepted compliments for what the Hayes children had accomplished, I swallowed my irritation. There would be time to correct the story later. That was what I always told myself. Later. Later became the night of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Mom wanted a large celebration at the inn on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. She invited relatives, former employees, local business owners, church friends, and several couples whose weddings we had hosted. The original guest count was 40. By the week of the party, it had grown to 63. Naturally, I organized everything. I created the menu, ordered the food, arranged tables, decorated the dining room, assigned guest rooms, and coordinated a small jazz trio from Madison. Derek arrived Friday afternoon carrying one suit bag and a bottle of whiskey. I had been awake since 5 that morning because a freezer had stopped working. He walked through the kitchen, sampled a piece of roast beef from a tray, and asked whether I had ordered the right champagne. It's the brand Mom requested. Good. The Barlows are coming. I waited for more. Who are the Barlows? Potential investors. In what? He glanced toward the kitchen staff, then lowered his voice as though he was sharing important news. I'm developing a new direction for the inn. That was the first I had heard of it. What direction? Expansion. More premium experiences, corporate wellness weekends, maybe a second property. Have you discussed that with Mom and Dad? He smiled. We've had conversations. Have you discussed it with me? You handle the guest side, Carrie. I'm talking about growth. He was the only person who called me Carrie after I repeatedly asked him not to. I handle every side. He laughed. You know what I mean. I did know. The work I performed was treated as a maintenance. The work he imagined doing was called vision. Before I could respond, Mom entered carrying a garment bag. Caroline, the upstairs hallway needs vacuuming. I asked housekeeping to do it. They missed the corners near room 9. I'm dealing with the freezer. Then do it after. She turned to Derek. Your father wants to show you the financial reports. Derek looked at me with a small, satisfied smile. Leadership meeting. Then he followed her out. I stood beside 40 pounds of meat we were trying to keep cold and told myself not to be petty. That was another word my family used whenever I noticed the difference between how they treated us. Petty. If Derek arrived 3 hours late, I was petty for mentioning it. If I worked 16 hours and asked him to carry 2 boxes, I was petty for keeping score. If my parents praised him for a weekend he spent drinking with guests while I ran the inn, I was petty for wanting credit. Some families do not deny favoritism. They simply teach the less favored child to feel ashamed for seeing it. Saturday began before sunrise. By 8, the kitchen smelled like coffee, onions, rosemary, and fresh bread. By noon, relatives began arriving. By 4, every guest room was full, the porch lights were glowing, and my mother had changed her dress 3 times. I spent most of the afternoon moving between the kitchen, dining room, and front desk. Derek stood near the fireplace greeting people. He wore a navy suit, shook hands, and accepted praise for the inn's success. My Aunt Carol touched his arm and said, Your grandfather would be so proud of what you've done here. Derek smiled. We're just getting started. I was standing 10 feet away, carrying a tray of glasses. He saw me. He did not correct her. At 6:30, the anniversary dinner began. The dining room looked beautiful. White candles reflected against the windows beyond which Pinewater Lake had disappeared into darkness. Golden maple branches ran along the center of each table. The jazz trio played softly near the fireplace. I had placed 1 seat for myself at the family table. It was between my cousin Rachel and an empty chair reserved for my father's older brother. Shortly before dinner, Mom pulled me aside. We need your chair. For whom? Martin Barlow. Derek's investor. He arrived unexpectedly. We can add another chair. The table will look crowded in photographs. I looked at the place card bearing my name. Where am I supposed to sit? You'll be moving between the kitchen and dining room anyway. I plan to eat with the family. She smiled as though I were being difficult in a harmless way. You know you're never comfortable sitting still during events. That's because no one else is working. Please don't start tonight. Derek appeared beside her. What's wrong? Nothing, Mom said. Caroline is upset about the seating. He looked at my place card. Put Barlow here. Carrie can eat later. I'm not an employee tonight. He glanced at my black dress and the apron tied around my waist. You're dressed like one. I had worn the apron to protect my dress while plating appetizers. I intended to remove it before dinner. Mom touched my shoulder. This night is important for the inn. So I don't belong at the family table. Don't make it sound cruel. What would you call it? She sighed. I would call it being practical. Practical was another family word. It meant Caroline gives something up. I removed my place card. Then I put Martin Barlow's name in its place. No one offered me another seat. I spent dinner serving the meal I had designed. Guests praised the food. My mother accepted every compliment. The recipes have been in our family for years, she told one table. That was not true. I created the rosemary pot roast after testing 7 versions during our first wedding season. But correcting her would have embarrassed the family. So I carried another tray. Between courses, Derek gave a speech. He spoke about tradition leadership and protecting what previous generations had built. He described Hayes Landing as the result of our family's shared sacrifice. The word shared almost made me laugh. Then he announced a new corporate retreat package. It included guided lake activities, farm-to-table dinners, and evening bonfires. Every detail came from a proposal I had written the previous winter. I had created the package after months of research and sent it to my parents. They told me the idea was too complicated. Now Derek presented it as his vision. Guests applauded. I stood beside the kitchen door holding dirty plates. After dessert, my parents were invited to the front of the room. Dad looked tired but happy. Mom held his hand and thanked everyone for supporting them through 40 years of marriage and 4 decades at the inn. Then she lifted her champagne glass. There is one more reason tonight is special, she said. The room quieted. Our family has spent years thinking about the future of Hayes Landing. My heart began beating faster. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped closer. I thought this was the conversation I had waited 9 years to hear. Mom smiled at Derek. When Richard and I retire, Hayes Landing will pass to our son. Applause exploded through the dining room. Derek stood. Dad hugged him. Aunts cried. The jazz pianist began playing a celebratory tune. Derek shook Martin Barlow's hand and announced that the next generation would honor the past while bringing the inn into a more ambitious future. I remained beside the kitchen door. No one looked at me. For 9 years, I had operated every part of that inn. I knew which pipes froze first in January. I knew which guest required feather-free pillows and which bride had lost her mother and needed someone to stand beside her before walking down the aisle. I knew how much flour we used during wedding season, which floorboard creaked outside room 6, and exactly how long the water needed to run before the upstairs shower became hot. Derek did not know where we stored the emergency generator key, but he was the son. And apparently that was the only qualification that mattered. The applause finally faded. I walked toward the family table. What happens to me? I asked. My mother's smile tightened. This isn't the time. You just announced the future of the place where I work and live. We'll discuss your position privately. My position? Derek reached for his champagne. You'll still manage the hospitality side. Under you, someone has to oversee the larger direction. Several relatives stared at their plates. Dad spoke quietly. Caroline, let your brother enjoy the moment. What about the wedding program I built? Derek shrugged. It belongs to the inn. The recipes, also part of the inn. The corporate retreat proposal you just presented, his expression changed. It was a family concept. I wrote it. You drafted some details. I created the entire program. Mom gave a short laugh. Not because anything was funny. It was the laugh she used to tell everyone I was being dramatic. Caroline has always been possessive about her little projects. A few relatives chuckled. I looked around the dining room, at the candles I arranged, the food I cooked, the photographs from weddings I coordinated, the menus I wrote, the guests who returned because I remembered their names. My entire life surrounded them, and they were calling it little. What do you believe my work is worth? I asked. Mom opened her purse. At first, I thought she was reaching for a tissue. Instead, she removed 2 $20 bills. She placed them beside my empty plate. There, she said. That should cover tonight's cooking. The room became very quiet. Derek picked up the money. For one hopeful second, I thought he would hand it back to her. Instead, he folded the bills and tucked them into the front pocket of my apron. You've been paid, he said. Can we enjoy the rest of the night? Someone laughed nervously. My father looked toward the window. My Aunt Carol pressed her lips together but said nothing. Not one person defended me. That was the moment the inn stopped feeling like home. Not because my parents chose Derek. I had suspected they would. It stopped feeling like home because 63 people watched my family reduce 9 years of my life to $40, and most of them were more uncomfortable with my reaction than with what had been done to me. I removed the apron. The bills fell to the floor. I placed the apron across the back of Derek's chair. Then you can handle Thanksgiving without me. Mom's face changed. Thanksgiving was 5 days away. Hayes Landing hosted a holiday weekend every year. All 12 rooms were booked. 48 people had reservations for dinner, including guests who had been returning for more than a decade. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I'm leaving." "You can't leave during service. The meal is over. We have cleanup. You have a future owner." Derek stood. "Don't be childish. I've spent 9 years making sure you never had to learn how this place runs. That was your choice." He intended the sentence to weaken me. Instead, it clarified everything. He was right. Staying had been my choice, which meant leaving could be my choice too. I picked up my coat and purse. Mom followed me into the lobby. "You're really going to embarrass us in front of everyone." "No, you already did that." "Your father is upset. Dad watched you hand me $40. She was making a point. "What point?" "That tonight was not about you." I looked at her. "That has been the point of every night in this family." I walked upstairs to my apartment. Maya did not live with me. I had no husband waiting at home, no children whose school schedules required stability. My family frequently used that fact against me. Because I was single, my time was considered communal. Because I had no children, holidays were never supposed to matter as much to me. Because I lived above the inn, knocking on my door at midnight was not considered an interruption. My life had been treated as empty space waiting to be filled by other people's needs. I packed one suitcase. I took my laptop, my grandmother's recipe box, my personal documents, several framed photographs, and a small wooden loon Dad had carved for me when I was a child. Everything else could wait. When I returned downstairs, the guests were gathering near the fireplace for photographs. Mom saw the suitcase. Her smile disappeared. "Where are you going?" "To Rachel's." My cousin Rachel lived 30 minutes away and had offered me her guest room more than once. "You're abandoning the inn before Thanksgiving." "I'm taking the vacation days I haven't used in 3 years." "You can't." "I just did." Derek stepped away from the photographer. "What passwords do I need?" I almost answered automatically. Then I stopped. "The operations binder is in the office." "What about the booking system?" "The instructions are in the binder." "The kitchen orders." "Binder." "Staff schedule." "Binder." He rolled his eyes. "Fine." He believed I had made myself replaceable by documenting everything. I had created those instructions because a responsible manager prepares for emergencies. But instructions cannot replace judgment. A binder can tell you how to confirm a dinner reservation. It cannot tell you that Mrs. Patterson becomes frightened when seated near the kitchen because her husband collapsed there during their final visit. It can list the boiler repair company. It cannot make the repairman answer at midnight because you once drove his daughter home during a snowstorm. It can show Derek the recipes. It cannot teach him how the dough should feel before a biscuit becomes light instead of heavy. Still, I said nothing. As I reached the front door, Dad called my name. I turned. He remained beside the family table, one hand resting on the back of his chair. "Come back tomorrow when you've calmed down." I am calm. "Then don't make a permanent decision based on one painful evening." I looked at the $40 still lying on the dining room floor. "This evening wasn't the injury, Dad. It was the receipt." I left. Rachel opened her front door before I reached the porch. She had already heard. Her mother, Aunt Carol, had texted her from the dinner. Rachel hugged me without asking whether I wanted advice. Inside, she had prepared the guest room with clean sheets and a lamp beside the bed. On the dresser sat a mug of tea. Those small details nearly made me cry harder than the public humiliation. For years, I had provided comfort so constantly that I had forgotten what it felt like to receive it. "You can stay as long as you want," Rachel said. "I may only need a few days. You can need more." That night, my phone lit up until nearly 3 in the morning. Mom sent the first message. "You hurt your father deeply." Then, "Guests noticed your behavior." Then, "Derek's investors were present. You may have damaged the future of the inn." Dad wrote, "Come back in the morning. We'll discuss compensation." Derek sent, "Send me the current staff list and the password for the event calendar." I responded once. "The password and staff information are in the office binder. I will not be working during my leave. For urgent building issues, call the maintenance numbers posted beside the desk." Derek replied, "You're enjoying this." I put the phone on silent. The next morning, I woke at 8:47. I had not slept past 6 in almost a decade. For several seconds, I panicked. Then I remembered where I was. No breakfast guests were waiting. No delivery truck needed unloading. No bride was calling about chair covers. I walked downstairs and Rachel handed me coffee. At 9:15, my phone began vibrating. Derek. I let it ring. He called again and again. Finally, he left a voicemail. The reservation system says we have 2 Martins arriving today. Which one gets the lake suite? The binder explained how to check guest notes. I did not answer. At 10:30, Mom called from Dad's phone. The linen delivery didn't arrive. I did not answer. At 11, the head housekeeper Denise sent a text. I'm sorry to bother you. Derek changed everyone's schedule without asking, and now we're short 3 people. Should I follow his version? I stared at the message. Denise had worked at Hayes Landing for 12 years. She was not the person who had humiliated me. But if I stepped back in through the side door, my family would learn that my boundaries could be bypassed through employees. I wrote, Derek has been named the future owner. Scheduling decisions now belong to him. Please protect your days off and do not accept extra shifts unless you want them. She responded with a sad face emoji. By Sunday afternoon, photographs of my parents' anniversary appeared on Facebook. My mother posted a carefully cropped image of the family table. The empty place where I should have sat was not visible. Her caption read, a beautiful night celebrating 40 years of marriage and welcoming Derek into his rightful role carrying our family legacy forward. Rightful role. Hundreds of people liked it. In another photograph, Derek stood beneath the Hayes Landing sign with Mom and Dad. The caption said, 3 generations of vision. I looked at the image for a long time. Then I noticed something in the background. My apron was still hanging over Derek's chair. Rachel saw me staring. Don't read the comments. Why? Because your mother is telling people you left over money. I read them anyway. One relative wrote, some people can never be happy for a sibling. Another said, your parents deserve better on their anniversary. A former classmate commented sad when jealousy destroys family traditions. Then Aunt Carol responded, I was present. Caroline did not leave over money. She left after being removed from the family table, publicly mocked, and handed $40 for 9 years of work. The comments stopped for several minutes. Then my mother deleted Aunt Carol's response. That told me everything. She did not want privacy. She wanted control of the story. On Monday, a local florist called me. Derek says you promised table arrangements for Thanksgiving. I did not. He said they were included in our wedding partnership. We have no wedding partnership that includes free holiday flowers. The bakery called next. Then the wine supplier. Then a musician scheduled to perform Friday evening. Derek had begun promising services and discounts based on informal relationships I had built. He assumed those people worked for the inn. In reality, many worked with me because I had paid on time, helped during their emergencies, and never treated their labor as an entitlement. By Tuesday morning, several vendors had declined. That afternoon, Mom finally left a message that did not sound angry. We need you to come back. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just need. I listened twice, then deleted it. Thanksgiving morning arrived under 6 inches of snow. Hayes Landing's holiday weekend usually began with coffee and cinnamon rolls in the lobby, followed by a lakeside walk, football in the lounge, and dinner at 4. At 9:20, Denise called. I almost ignored it. Then she sent a photograph. Water covered part of the laundry room floor. A pipe had burst near the old boiler. I immediately called the repairman, Mr. Kowalski. Not for my parents. For the employees and guests standing in a cold building. He answered on the second ring. I'm already heading there, he said. Denise called. Thank you. Derek told me he'd pay regular rates. It's Thanksgiving. I know. You should charge holiday emergency rates. There was a pause. Your brother said your family never pays those? My brother does not speak for you. Mr. Kowalski laughed once. That's not what he thinks. The pipe was repaired before noon, but the disruption delayed the kitchen. Derek had changed the menu because he believed my recipes were too rustic. He replaced the pot roast with prime rib added lobster bisque and promised individual chocolate soufflés for dessert. The kitchen staff had never prepared that menu for 48 guests. At 1, Denise sent another photograph. The prime rib was still nearly raw. At 1:30, the bisque had separated. At 2, Derek texted me directly. Call the kitchen and talk them through the soufflés. I did not respond. At 2:15, Mom is crying. At 2:20, Dad's blood pressure is up. At 2:28, this is still your family's reputation. That message almost worked. For 9 years, the inn's reputation had been the leash around my neck. Every emergency became mine because guests might be disappointed. Every unreasonable request became mine. because a bad review might appear online. Every holiday became mine because family traditions supposedly depended on me. I stood in Rachel's kitchen looking at the simple Thanksgiving dinner we had prepared together. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, 1 apple pie. 6 people were coming. No investors, no photographers, no one waiting for me to fail. I turned off my phone. At 4:30, we sat down to eat. Rachel's husband, Michael, asked everyone to name something they were grateful for. When it was my turn, I thought carefully. I'm grateful that being needed is not the same as being trapped. No one asked me to explain. At Hayes Landing, dinner was served almost 2 hours late. I learned the details later. The prime rib was unevenly cooked. Several portions had to be returned to the kitchen. The soufflés collapsed before reaching the tables. One longtime guest slipped near the damp laundry hallway, though thankfully she was not seriously injured. Derek blamed the kitchen staff. Mom blamed the snow. Dad blamed me. Then Mrs. Patterson, who had been visiting Hayes Landing every Thanksgiving for 11 years, asked the question my family could not answer. Where is Caroline? Mom told her I had taken a last-minute vacation. Denise, standing nearby, said quietly, she left after the anniversary dinner. What happened at the anniversary dinner? Mrs. Patterson asked. My mother tried to change the subject, but guests had phones. Someone had saved Aunt Carol's deleted comment. By evening, the truth had moved through the dining room. The person responsible for every Thanksgiving tradition had been removed from the family table, handed $40, and replaced by a man who did not know where the extra tablecloths were stored. The social media photographs changed too. Guests posted images of the cold dinner, the collapsed desserts, and Derek arguing with an employee beside the fireplace. One caption read, "Missing the warmth Hayes Landing used to have. It turns out warmth has a name." The post was shared hundreds of times locally. I did not celebrate. Watching something I had built fall apart did not feel satisfying. It felt like watching a home burn after someone told you the fire proved you had never owned it. On Friday morning, Dad appeared at Rachel's house. He had never visited her there before. Rachel asked whether I wanted her to send him away. I said no. Dad stood on the porch holding my apron. The $40 were folded in its pocket. I thought you might want this. I don't. He looked down at it. Thanksgiving was difficult. I heard. Derek made mistakes. He had 4 days. You had 9 years. That sentence surprised me. It was the first time Dad had said the number as if the years belonged to me. He shifted his weight. Your mother believes you wanted us to fail. If I wanted that, I would have ignored the burst pipe. His eyes lifted. Kowalski said you told him to charge the full holiday rate. He deserved it. Dad almost smiled, but the expression disappeared. We need to discuss your return. My return. The staff is upset. Vendors are refusing commitments. Guests are canceling winter reservations. Then Derek needs to repair those relationships. He isn't ready. You announced him as the future owner. That may have been premature. No. It was honest. Dad frowned. How was it honest? You showed me what you had already decided. If Thanksgiving had gone perfectly, would you be standing here? He did not answer. Would Mom have apologized? Silence. Would Derek have acknowledged my work? Dad looked toward the road. You're asking questions I can't answer. You can answer them. You just don't like the answer. He gripped the apron. What do you want, Caroline? For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would demand the inn. A title. A share. A public apology. But standing on Rachel's porch, I realized I did not want to negotiate my way back into the same life. I want my personal recipes, photographs, event plans, and contacts removed from Derek's presentations. That could damage the business. They were my work. You created them while helping the family. And the family used them while denying I had created anything. Do you want money? Number. Then what? Credit? Choice. A life that does not collapse every time the inn has a problem. He stared at me. You're really leaving? Yes. He sat on the porch step. For the first time in my life, my father looked like a man who had run out of instructions. I thought you loved the place. I do. Then how can you walk away? Because loving a place does not require letting people erase me inside it. He remained there for several minutes. Before leaving, he placed the apron on the porch chair. I'm sorry I didn't speak at dinner. I waited. He did not add excuses. That made the apology more meaningful. I watched what your mother did, he continued. And I was afraid that defending you would ruin the announcement. So you let the announcement ruin me? Yes. The word sounded painful. But it was true. He left without asking me to forgive him. My mother was less willing to accept what had happened. She sent long messages accusing me of punishing Dad during his retirement. She posted old family photographs and captions about children forgetting sacrifices made by their parents. In one photograph, I was 12 years old standing behind the front desk with my grandmother. Mom wrote, "She loved this inn before ambition changed her." I responded privately, "I still love the inn. I no longer accept being mistreated to prove it." She did not answer. Derek called the following week. His tone was calmer than it had been during Thanksgiving. "I owe you an apology." I remained silent. He continued, "I thought running the inn meant making decisions and representing the family. What do you think now? It means noticing 1,000 things before they become disasters." That's part of it. I opened your operations binder, and it's 400 pages. 432. He exhaled. "I didn't know. You never asked." "I know." He told me he had assumed employees exaggerated my importance because they were loyal to me. Then he tried to organize a December wedding. The bride requested the ceremony beneath the lakeside oak. Derek promised it without checking the weather plan, lighting requirements, or accessibility route for the bride's grandmother. He did not know the old path became ice after sunset. Denise stopped him before someone was injured. "I've spent my whole life thinking you worried too much," he said. "Now I understand that everyone else could relax because you worried first." It was the most accurate description anyone in my family had ever given my work. "Why didn't you correct Mom at dinner?" I asked. He did not pretend to misunderstand. "Because I wanted the inn. You still do." "I wanted the version where everyone admired me for owning it. I'm not sure I want the actual life." "At least that's honest." "I should never have put the money in your apron." Number. I thought it was funny. Because everyone laughing with you meant no one was looking too closely at what you hadn't done. He became quiet. That's probably true. I accepted his apology. I did not return. Those were separate decisions. An apology can acknowledge the past. It does not automatically receive control of your future. In January, I moved to Madison. For the first time in 9 years, I lived in a home that did not share a wall with my workplace. I rented a small apartment overlooking a park and accepted a position managing events for a botanical garden. The salary was slightly lower than what I should have earned at the inn, but I had health insurance scheduled, days off, and coworkers who did not call me ungrateful when I went home. On my first Friday, my supervisor walked into my office at 5:10. "Why are you still here? There's a wedding tomorrow." "The setup team has it. I can review the floor plan again." "You already reviewed it." She picked up my coat from the back of the chair and handed it to me. "Go have a life, Caroline." I nearly cried in the elevator. At Hayes Landing, going home early had been treated as abandonment. Here, leaving work was considered normal. Over the next several months, I began discovering parts of myself that had been buried beneath responsibility. I joined a pottery class. I had dinner with friends without checking my phone under the table. I slept through a thunderstorm without worrying about whether the lakeside windows were leaking. I bought groceries for one person and learned that a carton of eggs could remain in my refrigerator for more than 2 days. Most importantly, I stopped introducing myself by explaining what my family needed from me. The inn struggled through the winter. Derek remained temporarily, but he hired an experienced general manager named Allison Price. Unlike him, Allison asked questions. She contacted me once to request permission to keep 2 of my recipes on the menu. Not to assume, to ask. She offered payment and clear credit. I agreed to license the apple cake and brunch biscuits for 1 year. The new menus read, "Created by Caroline Hayes during the restoration years of Hayes Landing." My mother hated that wording. Guests loved it. The inn also replaced the 3 generations of vision photograph with a small display about the people who had rebuilt the property over time. Housekeepers, cooks, maintenance workers, seasonal employees, and local vendors appeared alongside family members. My photograph was included. Not at the center. I did not need the center. I only needed not to be erased. Derek eventually returned to Milwaukee. He admitted he preferred sales and networking to operating a hotel. For once, my parents did not call that leadership. They called it what it was. A different skill. The succession announcement disappeared from the website. Hayes Landing was placed under professional management while Mom and Dad retained ownership. The family name remained on the sign, but the family no longer pretended a last name was enough to operate the place. My relationship with Dad changed slowly. He began calling once a week. Not to ask for help, to ask how I was. At first, the conversations lasted less than 5 minutes because neither of us knew how to speak without a problem to solve. Eventually, he told me about physical therapy. I told him about the botanical garden He asked to see photographs of a spring wedding I coordinated. When I sent them, he replied, "You created something beautiful." "Not we, you." I saved the message. Mom held on to the old story longer. She believed I had abandoned her. In her mind, everything she asked from me had been proof of trust. It took her months to understand that trust without consent can feel exactly like exploitation. The turning point came the following summer. A bride named Emily booked Hayes Landing for her wedding. Years earlier, I had helped Emily's older sister marry there. Emily remembered me and asked whether I could attend as a guest. Allison sent the invitation directly. I almost declined. Then I realized I was tired of allowing my family's behavior to exile me from a place I still loved. So I went. For the first time, I entered Hayes Landing without carrying boxes. I wore a pale blue dress, no apron, no clipboard, no emergency keys. The front desk employee welcomed me by name and handed me a glass of sparkling water. I walked onto the porch overlooking Pinewater Lake. The birch trees moved in the evening breeze. White chairs faced the water. The old dock had been repaired. For several minutes, I simply stood there. The place was still beautiful, and it had survived without consuming me. Mom found me before the ceremony. She looked older, softer, and uncertain. "I didn't know you were coming." "Emily invited me. She always liked you." I liked her too. We stood beside each other watching guests take their seats. Then Mom said, "There's a chair for you." I looked at her. She gestured toward the second row. A place card read, "Caroline Hayes, honored guest." The words were almost too much. I didn't ask for that. Allison did. "Did you object?" Mom looked ashamed. My first instinct was to say, "Family doesn't need special recognition." That sounds like you. I'm trying to understand why I believed recognition was something Derek deserved and something you were selfish for wanting. I did not rescue her from the discomfort. She continued, "When you worked here, I saw every task you completed. I just treated the completion as proof that asking had been reasonable. You never noticed the cost. Number. And when I mentioned the cost, you called it complaining." Yes. The ceremony music began softly. Guests turned towards the aisle. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry about the $40. I waited." "I'm sorry I laughed," she added. "I'm sorry I took your chair. And I'm sorry I told everyone Derek would inherit the life you built without speaking to you first. That apology doesn't return 9 years. I know. It doesn't make me ready to come back. I know that too." For once, she was not apologizing as the first step in obtaining something. She was simply admitting what she had done. I sat in the second row. Mom sat behind me. During the reception, I ate a complete meal while it was still warm. No one handed me a tray. No one asked me to check the bathrooms. When the apple cake was served, the bride's grandmother read the menu card and asked whether I was the Caroline who created it. "I am." "It's wonderful." "Thank you." My mother heard. She did not say it was a family recipe. She smiled and said, "She worked on it for months." That was all. But after years of being erased through small sentences, being restored through one mattered. A year after the anniversary dinner, my parents invited me to Thanksgiving at Hayes Landing. This time, Mom called 6 weeks in advance. "We're hiring the staff for the entire weekend," she said. "You would be coming as a guest." "What about seating?" "There is a chair beside your father." "What about Derek?" "Across from you." "Who is cooking?" "Allison's team." "You're not expecting me to help." A pause. Then Mom answered honestly, "I may want you to help because I'm used to wanting that, but I will not ask." That was not perfect. It was real. I accepted. Thanksgiving afternoon, I arrived at 3:30 carrying 1 bottle of wine. 1. Not 6 bags of groceries. Not flowers serving dishes, emergency candles, and a backup dessert. Just wine. Derek met me at the door. He wore an apron. I laughed before I could stop myself. "Careful," he said. "This thing might be worth $40. The joke could have hurt. Instead, his expression made it clear that the shame belonged to him now, not me. He reached into the apron pocket and removed 2 $20 bills. The same bills. Dad had kept them after the anniversary dinner. Derek placed them on the lobby desk. "I don't want these in your pocket anymore." "Neither do I." "What should we do with them?" I thought for a moment. Then I added $60 and placed the full amount in the staff holiday fund. "Give them to the people working tonight." Derek nodded. No speech. No dramatic embrace. Just a corrected action. At dinner, my chair was waiting. I sat beside Dad and across from Derek. Mom brought out the first course, but Allison stopped her near the kitchen. "You're a guest tonight too, Susan." Mom almost protested. Then she sat down. For several minutes, no one knew what to do with themselves. The Hayes family had spent decades believing celebration required one person to miss it. That year, everyone remained at the table. When dessert arrived, Dad lifted his coffee cup. I'd like to say something. My body tensed. Old instincts do not disappear simply because people begin behaving better. Dad looked toward me. This inn is still standing because Caroline gave it 9 years of her life. The room became quiet. She rebuilt its reputation, created its wedding program, trained most of the people who now train everyone else, and carried this family through years when we were too frightened to admit how close we were to losing the place. Mom reached for my hand. I let her take it. Dad continued. We thanked her by calling her work duty and her brother's plans leadership. Derek lowered his eyes. That was wrong. No one applauded. I was grateful. Some truths deserve silence more than celebration. Dad raised his cup. To Caroline, not for what she can do for us, but for who she is when we aren't asking her to do anything. We drank. Then Allison cut the apple cake. That was the ending my younger self had always wanted. Recognition at the family table. But by then, I understood something deeper. The recognition mattered because I no longer needed it to decide whether my life had value. If my family had never apologized, my work would still have been real. If the inn had failed, the years I spent building it would still have revealed what I was capable of. If Derek had inherited everything and continued taking credit, the truth would not have changed. My worth had never depended on whether my mother announced it into a microphone. The most important decision I made was not leaving the anniversary dinner. It was refusing to return simply because they struggled without me. For years, their dependence had convinced me I was loved. But love is not proved by how quickly people panic when you stop serving them. Love is proved by whether they make room for you when you arrive with empty hands. I still visit Hayes Landing. Sometimes I walk through the kitchen and remember the woman I used to be, the one who believed every unfinished task was a personal failure. I feel tenderness for her now. She was not weak. She was loyal in a place that kept exploiting loyalty. She thought endurance would eventually become belonging. What she had to learn was that belonging should not require endurance. My family announced that my brother would inherit the inn I saved. My mother handed me $40 in front of everyone. And the person I had been for 9 years finally disappeared that night. Not because they broke her, because she understood she no longer had to exist. The woman who replaced her did not beg for a title. She did not sabotage the inn or punish innocent employees. She packed a suitcase, protected what was hers, and allowed the people who dismissed her labor to experience its absence. My parents lost the daughter who never said no. My brother lost a future he wanted only when someone else was carrying it. The inn lost the illusion that a family name mattered more than the people doing the work. And I lost an apron that had become heavier than any chain. Of all those losses, mine was the only one that felt like freedom. So tell me honestly, if your family gave your life's work to a favorite sibling, removed your seat from the table, and handed you $40 as a joke, would you ever return after they apologized, or would you let them live forever with the future they chose?